This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from across the continent. But let's start with a run through the markets for you. Another day with a lot of red ink, frankly, across our board here today. A little better than it was yesterday, to be fair, though. The NSE 20 is still churning out results for the full year. Cooperative Bank being the latest tier one bank to announce its results. Its net income was up 11%, and the markets clearly loved that result. But the focus, it seems, the theme across all of the tier ones is a stronger focus on lending by mobile. Coop Bank, for example, wants to lend at least $100 million by June through its mobile outlet. Will it hit it? We'll have to wait and see. Here's what's coming up tonight. The UK Prime Minister is making an 11th hour plea for Brexit extension at the EU summit. Nigeria announces a reduction of its stake in joint oil ventures with multinational companies. We'll explore why. And China's head of state is heading to Italy, Monaco and France on a slew of state visits. All right then, quite a bit to get through tonight, but let's start with Brexit. The final EU summit before the UK leaves the bloc is taking place, and tensions over there are pretty much at boiling point. The Prime Minister Theresa May's exit deal has been rejected twice, remember, in the House of Commons, and that has prompted a request for an extension of the exit up to the 30th of June. The EU Council President Donald Tusk has asked the British MPs to back the withdrawal plans or face the prospect of a no-deal exit. The Prime Minister was compelled to seek a request on an extension of Article 50, which could be declined if she fails to provide a credible solution to this deadlock. However, the ultimatum provided by the EU President has offered a way to demand a second referendum, which could, in theory, reverse Brexit. All right, then, so let's get you the latest on what's happening with Brexit. Mariam Zaidi joins us from Brussels. Richard Bestick, of course, is covering developments over in London. Mariam, let me start with you. This does seem like an unstoppable force meets immovable object situation, doesn't it? Especially because the EU has rejected the withdrawal agreement twice, but the EU extension is contingent on that very thing that has been rejected. So realistically, what can be achieved before next week, Friday?
Hi, Ramah. Well, you know, that's what you say is very true. Theresa May is both an unstoppable force and an immovable object. In fact, Richard and I were discussing this very thing yesterday. I mean, I've been saying she's made of Teflon. Richard, though, seems to think that she's made of other things and that they stick to her. Maybe he can tell you a little bit later on what he meant by that. But, you know, back to your question, the one thing no one really wants here is a no-deal Brexit. And here is the latest. Draft summit guidelines on Article 50 say that the European Council commits to agreeing to an extension until the 22nd of May, provided the withdrawal agreement is approved, of course, by the House of Commons next week. Now, given that the UK does not intend to hold elections to the European Parliament, no extension is possible beyond that date. So there you go, an extension shorter than what Theresa May wanted, but at least that cliff edge is avoided for now at least. The conclusions will also approve the instrument relating to the deal and the joint statement supplementing the political declaration agreed between the European Commission and the UK when there was that meeting in Strasbourg in March. Now, Richard, of course, can also tell us if this will be enough. Do these now substantially change the motion so that the Speaker of the House of Commons will allow the vote to go ahead? But also, one last thing, the UK Prime Minister was repeatedly asked by leaders what she would do if, of course, her MPs don't vote for her deal, and apparently she didn't answer the question.
Indeed, Richard, coming to you. So the Prime Minister clearly in a very difficult place. Yesterday evening, in a statement from number 10 Downing Street, she basically said, listen, I understand your frustration, citizens of the UK. I understand you're tired of parliamentary procedure and political shenanigans. But how was her speech received by the public?
Ramah, members of Parliament here are furious with that short statement live to the nation last night. It was interpreted as the Prime Minister going over the head of Parliament directly to the people, saying, I'm on your side, and blaming all the chaos and crisis of Brexit on the members of Parliament and what she described as their arcane rules. She said the British people are fed up with the toing and froing over Brexit. She's probably right about that, and she said she shared those sentiments. Well, MPs are absolutely outraged by that. First of all, they say they have gone to Parliament to genuinely put before debate their feelings on the issue and the feelings of their constituencies. And one more thing, she was accused of incendiary remarks. The remarks she made were described as explosive and incendiary, and the reason for that is the issue of Brexit in this country is now so toxic that a number of members of Parliament here have already received death threats following their stand on certain positions on Brexit. So the anger here is palpable. What will it mean for the next meaningful vote, the next vote on her deal with the European Union when it comes before Parliament next week? Well, she will have not done herself any favours. If the numbers weren't there before, they're going to be there in less of a scale when it comes back to Parliament next week for a debate and that third vote on her deal.
Indeed. So, Mariam, let's look at the endgame scenario here, one of the worst case scenarios. In the event of a no-deal Brexit, even though everyone wants to avoid it, what sort of economic damage would be felt among the EU 27?
Well, you know, the EU does keep, of course, saying and reassuring that it's ready and prepped for a hard Brexit. But you know, just yesterday I was in the Netherlands interviewing a Dutch commissioner for foreign investment. Now, the Dutch could be one of the big profiteers from Brexit business. 60 companies have already publicly announced that they're moving to the Netherlands, and in most cases it is Amsterdam. Now, you have companies from Panasonic, Sony to the Discovery Channel, and the Dutch are also courting 250 others, but they're not going to make those names public just yet. But, you know, it's not to say that a hard Brexit isn't going to hurt. The UK is one of the Netherlands' biggest trading partners, and then across the EU, a hard Brexit would hit citizens in the EU hard, resulting in something like 40 billion euros in lost income in the EU's remaining 27 member states. And if there is a sort of soft Brexit, those losses halve, but it's still a massive loss, Ramah.
Indeed, and of course we just saw a little earlier today the CBI and of course the unions and employers federations putting out a joint statement saying the effects of that will be felt for generations. One last question for you, Richard. The UK had 2 years to get this deal done, and even accounting for the disinformation before the referendum, it was pretty clear that a no-deal Brexit was a possibility and it would be painful. Now that MPs have tossed out this long negotiated agreement, why aren't they focusing on preparing for a no-deal Brexit instead?
Well, they are focusing in Whitehall. All the departments of government are gearing up, including the Defence Department, putting 3,500 troops on standby ahead of Britain crashing out. Certainly the House of Commons, where the debate has been going on, has focused on avoiding that at all costs. They are absolutely terrified of reports coming out of the Bank of England and of course the Treasury, the Treasury as well, saying that should there be a crash out to Brexit, a no-deal Brexit, the economic consequences for Britain would be calamitous. So certainly they've worked very hard, but we are now getting close, very close indeed, to a situation where Britain could crash out of the European Union without any agreement whatsoever, and the fears of Parliament, the Treasury and the Bank of England could soon be realised in the economy.
Indeed. Let us see for whom the bell tolls. Richard Bestick in London, Mariam Zaidi in Brussels, thank you very much. Of course, you can expect to hear a lot more from our team in both ends of the world in a lot more detail in future bulletins. For now, though, let's come back to the continent. Nigeria has announced plans to reduce its stakes in joint oil ventures with international companies to 40% this year. Now, this comes as the government advances plans to boost what state revenue is available and also enhance investments in the domestic energy sector. Well, companies like Royal Dutch Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil all operate in Nigeria, but they have to do so through joint ventures with a state-owned company, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, or NNPC as it's more commonly known. The government is working to raise at least $2 billion through the restructuring of equity in oil assets to fund its 2019 national budget. It's also put in measures by ordering the payment of at least $20 billion in back taxes that it says international oil firms owe, and it's trying to boost production of oil to at least 2.3 million barrels of crude per day. So then, exactly how is this going to work? Deji Badmus is live in Lagos, Nigeria tonight with more data on this story. So, Deji, the budget minister says the objective here is to reduce the stake down to 40%. Presumably, the JV partners have the first right of refusal on the sale of that stake. So is a plan here to turn around to Shell, to Chevron, to ExxonMobil and say, here's the stake, please buy us out?
Well, it's a huge presumption because we are not absolutely sure they have the right of first refusal, but I would think that would probably have been built into the JVs, and it wouldn't be out of place if they actually had that right of first refusal, that they would be the first the government will consider. But what we're hearing and what some people have said is that, look, some people have said they would love to know who the government wants to sell these assets to, and that they would also hope that the government would do it transparently, make it public, and you know, do an open bidding if you like. But if there's this guy is now involved, and talking about the IOCs now, if the IOCs involved in this joint venture actually have that right of first refusal, it wouldn't be out of place at all that they would take up the stakes.
Indeed, and of course, looking at their balance sheets, they have quite a bit of cash that they're willing to throw around. In his presentation, though, the budget minister, Udo Doma, he said that he aimed to have this process wrapped up by the end of the year. But did he give an indicative number for how much money he thinks he could raise from the sale of this sell down, really, of the JV stakes?
No, he did not. I mean, the only figure we have is the figure released by the Debt Management Office sometime in 2017, when it said Nigeria was looking to raise around $2.32 billion. I would expect that it would be in the region of $2 billion, but the Minister of Budget and National Planning now did not give any figure, but there's no question that we're looking at a huge amount of money here. Maybe what Nigeria would have made some time ago when the price of oil was up, maybe it would have been high, but you know, the price of oil is down at the moment. So unless we get some kind of appreciation in the price of oil before the time of the sale, because the government hopes to wrap this up before the end of this year, then we would expect something probably heftier. But I think it will be in that region of 2 billion or so, since it's going into the budget.
Indeed. So this, of course, isn't the first time that this idea has been proposed, because back in 2017, as you pointed out, the Debt Office indicated a similar process could raise the amount of money you just pointed out, over $2 billion. But what happened to that plan?
Well, it's still the plan that the government is continuing with. I mean, the government actually unfolded this plan, if you like, through its economic recovery and growth plan that it launched sometime in 2016. I think this is still a continuation of that plan. Back then, there was no rush at all, but, you know, and don't also forget, Ramah, that this government, and not just this government, even the government before the past government had actually tried, for over 10 years, I would suppose, various governments had actually tried to, you know, cut down on their stakes to raise money. But then, you know, the urgency wasn't there. I mean, we were making so much from oil. Now we are in an urgent situation. Now the debt of this country, it's really huge. We've borrowed so much, and the government is planning to cut down on its borrowing. And so that's the reason why we're doing this now. So it's just a continuation of what was disclosed in 2017.
Indeed. So one last question for you. I'm trying to look at this from the oil majors' side. Since Nigeria is yet to pass the petroleum industry bill. I mean, that's on the table for better part of a decade, frankly. So what's the rationale from their perspective to say, okay, yes, there's 10%, an extra 15% on the table, but what does it come with? Does it come with stronger control over output, more beneficial revenue splits? What's on the table here for the IOCs?
Look, absolutely. It will come with better control over output, and of course there will be beneficial. There will be benefits now when it comes to revenue split. You just have to look at the JVs, even before. I mean that we have at the moment. The federal government in some of these JVs now would have around 60% stake, and but then you have these IOCs operating them. So there's no question at all that if they took control, if for instance, let's just take Shell for instance, that has about 55% stake. If Shell was to take, say, 20 or 15% stake that the government would be hoping to sell, of course it will have better, in terms of revenue, when it comes to splitting the revenue, it will have better revenue in terms of the sharing of profit now, and it will have better control over the output, because we know that before now, the government of Nigeria has always had a problem with funding its own part of the bargain when it comes to contributing money now to run the operations. Nigeria has always had a problem with what we call the joint venture cash call. Money doesn't come in on time. So I believe that these IOCs would want a situation where they're in better control, they're able to make investment decisions very quickly, and they wouldn't have to resort to government bureaucracy and all of that to take some very important decisions. So I think that despite the fact that we do not have the petroleum industry bill in place, this is a sweet deal that I don't think the IOCs would want to miss. It's something that they'll want to cashing on. Forget the issue of the PIG not being in place. This is a big deal, Ramah, and they would want to cashing on it because there's a lot of money to be made here, Ramah.
Indeed. Let's hope that the stake sales are actually put up in a transparent bidding process. Deji Badmus, live in Lagos. Thank you very much. Now, on to Zimbabwe. The tobacco selling season has started over there, and we're seeing the highest selling price at $4.50 a kilo. That's down from $4.90. Now, the output is set to dip by about 5% this year after drought pretty much decimated the sector. The start of the marketing season was delayed this year following the hold up on planting due to the late onset of the rains. The season will have 3 auction floors after being licensed for sales. That includes a tobacco sales floor, a Boca tobacco auction floors, and a Premier tobacco auction floor as well. In 2019, registration of farmers to sell the leaf went up as the flu-cured tobacco marketing season also saw a 46% rise to 170,000. It's reached a record high in terms of output of 252 million kilograms. Zimbabwe's second largest earner of foreign exchange raked in $892 million in 2018. All right then, company news, a very eclectic setup for you. Let's start with mining, where the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union AMCU has lost the court case where it opposed the rights of Sibanye-Stillwater to extend a wage deal. Now, the deal stipulated a $49 a month increase in the first 2 years and a $58 a month increase in the final year. AMCU demanded a $70 a month increase. Both the company and AMCU have refused to budge from this stance. The strike is now in its 5th straight month. Over in Zambia, authorities there have banned an energy drink after it was found to have been adulterated with Viagra. Now, the ban followed a complaint from the country's medicine regulator suggesting that the Power Natural High Energy drink SX had been spiked with the erectile dysfunction drug. Zambia has ordered the manufacturer to pull the drink from shelves after tests showed that it contained sildenafil citrate. Over in Kenya, Diamond Trust Bank has accrued after-tax profit of over $70 million, up from $68.4 million in 2017, up by about 3 percentage points, or rather by 3%, my apologies. Operating profit was mainly supported by interest income from government securities. That was up 9% to over $108 million. Income was largely driven by government bonds, the bank's share of gross non-performing loans and fees, and commissions on loans and advances. And finally, the German car maker BMW expects its profits in 2019 to be below levels in 2018, but it does intend to make some fairly aggressive cost cuts. That could indicate a tumble of more than 10% in net earnings. The company says it plans on saving at least $13 billion through efficiency improvements. The car maker said it would be burdened with investments and also measures to meet strict EU emissions limit that are set to take effect from 2020. That's a run through your headlines. It's 18:20 GMT. Time for a short break. You're watching Global Business Africa. We'll have an update on the rescue and relief efforts in the wake of Cyclone Idai. And commuters in Egypt's coastal city of Alexandria get to enjoy the services of some spruced-up trams. We'll take you for a ride when we come back.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Aid agencies are still scrambling to reach survivors of Cyclone Idai in Mozambique as a full scale of the disaster does become clear. In the port city of Beira, for example, aid workers say they have only 2 to 3 days worth of clean water left. At least 300 people are confirmed to have died in Mozambique and in neighboring Zimbabwe. But of course, the death toll is expected to rise because thousands at this point are still stranded and unaccounted for. Mozambique has a GDP of about $13 billion. It's still recovering, remember, from a currency collapse and a massive debt default. It's declared a national state of emergency as it deals with the catastrophic flooding in Cyclone Idai's wake. Quick update for you on what's happening in that country. Angela Coppola joins us from Maputo on the phone with more data on this. So, Angela, the forecast is for more rain at least until tomorrow. But walk us through the weather conditions over there. Are they conducive now for round-the-clock air search and rescue?
Evening, Ramah. In fact, I am in Beira at the operational centre at the airport. So it's been 27 degrees today. It's been balmy. The sun started coming through as we landed. And it actually was conducive for search and rescue. In fact, by late afternoon, the wind had blown all the clouds away. The challenge, of course, is that there aren't enough choppers at Beira Airport yet. We have an oversupply of medically trained people, but because of the high water levels, roads are still inaccessible to many places. The head of operations for Gifts of the Givers was telling me earlier that they can't use boats or barges either, so they're waiting. It's understood, though, that this organization is also planning to use around 4 choppers to get their teams off the ground and start doing their jobs, and that's probably going to happen tomorrow and on Saturday. They're currently sitting around and just literally waiting. What's irritating some of the operators is the big SANDF RX chopper that is sitting on the tarmac here has done one real mission today and several VIP missions. So it's not the optimal use of resources, I'm told. Ramah?
Indeed. So the estimate for the number of people in need of food aid, at least next door in Zimbabwe, is at least 200,000. Can you give us a sense of how many people have been displaced and are in need of food aid, at least in the medium term, across North Mozambique, which is where the damage is most heavily concentrated?
Well, look, there are still thousands of people in need of immediate assistance in the province. Agencies can't put a definite number on this yet because they can only do aerial surveys, which aren't working that well. But we're led to believe that there are at least 5,000 people in dire straits as we speak, and they need to be evacuated immediately because of the life-threatening situation they're in. Conservatively, those estimates probably run tens and twenties of thousands of people who need food, and that's not in the medium term. That's an immediate need. All of the crops in the area have been destroyed, and much of it is subsistence crops. So the people have not only lost their homes, they've also lost their food supply. Ramah?
Unfortunate things here. Thank you for the update. That's Angela Kopla, of course, in Maputo. He's going to keep you updated on what's happening in the country. Now, let's come back to East Africa. Kenya's newly formed space agency, in partnership with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, has announced plans to start monitoring drought conditions from space. The entities will join forces to monitor, transmit and essentially translate information gathered from satellites up there into forecasts of growing conditions that could essentially be used to guide and plan for food production. Now, the partnership is also going to offer a relatively powerful approach to risk assessment that could be absolutely vital in securing affordable credit and crop insurance. A couple of other countries are involved in this program: Ghana, Tanzania, Senegal and Sierra Leone. So let's get your details on this. Dr. John Njoroge Kimani is the Acting Director General of the Kenya Space Agency. He's with me in studio tonight. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you very much.
So, last February, you indicated that agriculture was a priority matter for you as far as the value proposition for Kenyan-owned, Kenyan-operated satellite information was concerned. What's the value proposition that we're missing here?
Like you said, one of the major concerns in Kenya is how we monitor agriculture. And as a Kenya Space Agency, we are keen to make sure that we use satellite-based agricultural monitoring to be able to monitor our crops, to be able to monitor pests, to be able to monitor areas that require fertilizers so that we can improve the yields for our farmers.
We can also get pretty much real-time information from whatever satellites we have up there as well, can't we?
Yes, in fact, Kenya has had a long-standing relationship with the Italian Space Agency, and Kenya is lucky because we do have antennas that are collecting data 24 hours a day in Malindi, and we have connected, courtesy of the Kenya Education Networks, we have connected the antennas in Malindi to our institutions of higher learning and other research institutions. And now, courtesy of the new initiative, we are able to get hold of this data, analyze it, and feed it to farmers in a way that helps us to advise them so that they may know the type of fertilizers they need to use.
And when to plant and so on
and so when to plant.
I'm glad you brought up the data question because I'm curious about the operational model. Once the data has been downloaded, right, at the Broglio Space Center down in Malindi, what happens next? What's the chain of custody from the Space Center into the universities? Who owns it? What are the copyright issues around it? Because presumably there's an enormous cost in putting a satellite into space. So these services are not necessarily, quote unquote, free.
Yes, that's a very good question. The current state of affairs is that the majority of the data that we are using in Kenya is free data. Whether somebody is paying for that data, the majority of the data we are using in the country right now is not paid for. And it's because we have had collaborations with very many entities. And the first entity is the Italian Space Agency. The data that we get from Malindi is obtained by the Italian Space Agency. So the input that the Kenya government does is in analyzing the data.
So would I be correct, and I know this might be a bit of a crude analogy, but would I be correct in saying that the data access is sort of their rent for having a facility here in East Africa?
Yes, to a big extent, to a large extent, we have an agreement between the two countries, and what you are calling rent leader is the provision, because we are actually using their space equipment to receive the data. So yes, you can call it the rent.
It's a sort of quid pro quo, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so the Broglie Space Center used to be called San Marco. It's been around since 1964,
You're right.
as I recall.
You're right.
But it's still owned by the Italian Space Agency. That's not ours as Kenya, is it?
Correct.
So when are we building ours?
We have now established the Kenyan Space Agency. The Kenyan Space Agency was inaugurated last year in the month of September. Now, our first focus, the initial focus, is to make sure that we do not rely, like we have done in the last 50 years, on other people. So we will hit the ground running, making sure that what happens in Malindi, and this is contained in the agreement that we have just negotiated, what happens in Malindi is done at equal partner levels between the Kenyan government and the Italian government.
Right. There's something else that I'm curious about, the private sector element in the space business, because we've seen for the most part in the last 5 years or so, it's been companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and so on and so forth, who've really pushed forward the cost of getting payloads into orbit. They've made it easier for people to access space.
Correct.
And Kenya is in this really advantageous geographical location where 3 degrees south of the equator, you need a lot less fuel to get a payload into high orbit. But where's the private sector coming into this? If I want to come to you and say, okay, I'd like to set up a space launch facility in Malindi, what next? How do I go about it?
Yes, as we speak, we have had already very many private people showing a lot of interest in doing a number of things. I think what is most selling around Kenya, like you said, has a geographical advantage because we are along the equator. So anybody who wants to send a satellite, an equatorial satellite, would benefit to launch from Kenya. We also have more people getting interested in having experiments and being involved in the International Space Station. And if we had a spaceport in Kenya, because of our elevations, especially around the northern part of Kenya, we would have very, very cheap launches made from Kenya. So one of the first things that we are trying to discuss with various international partners is to see how we can have spaceports developed in one of our elevated regions in Kenya.
All right. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there. Otherwise, we'd stay here all day talking about payload costs and getting them into orbit. But Dr. Njoroge Kimani, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, then. So let's move on to Egypt. Renovated trams, not as high-tech as sending payloads into orbit. Renovated trams in the Egyptian coastal city of Alexandria. They're bringing quite a bit of joy to commuters there because they're taking on a historic landmark. These carriages are designed to handle Alexandria's weather conditions on the Mediterranean Sea and function on existing infrastructure. CGTN's Brian Toussaint has the details.
These trams are taking on an iconic status in this coastal Egyptian city. The difference between the old and the new carriers can be spotted from the outside as the commuting experience itself becomes far more modern.
The tram takes a smooth shape that allows it to operate easily within the city's network. The city has mixed traffic system, so this tram suits its shape. The tram has high standard safety systems as well as a fire system. It has an emergency brake system and the control of the drive to stop the car in less than a second in case anything happens.
Alexandria's tramway system was upgraded after 15 new vehicles were introduced to the network. The new units are the first to be added to the city in 3 decades. Vamped with Wi-Fi internet service, a GPS, and an electronic fire alarm system, the trams are supported by rubber tires to decrease noise while moving.
We haven't brought in new trams for 32 years. Since 2015, we have had a vision of transforming the city of Alexandria into an environmentally friendly city. Here, we actually have a tram network that doesn't exist in any other city, not in Cairo, and nowhere else in Africa.
The tram is new in every way. There is air conditioning and a speed Wi-Fi. The whole idea of having Wi-Fi is very new to us.
Alexandria's tramway system has been operating since 1860. It is the most popular mode of transport in this city. And as the city revamps its public transport system, the new trams are expected to be pivotal to its plans to go green and eco-friendly by 2030. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
It's about 18:35 GMT. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. The Chinese president is in Italy, and he'll be heading to Monaco and France on state visits. And the US Federal Reserve holds rates steady. We'll explore why when we come back.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. This is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
From Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. These are the stories making your headlines at this hour. We're going to be starting with the World Food Programme. It says that thousands of people are in need of food aid in Zimbabwe, Malawi and Mozambique, especially over the next 3 months to come. The World Food Programme is looking for more than $5 million in order to provide food, logistical support in response to the flooding in the affected areas. Aid agencies from around the world have been coordinating relief efforts in the Beira area, that's in the northern end of Mozambique. In Somalia, security concerns have been raised in the wake of the pullout of government troops from army bases after a payment dispute. In the southern part of the country, troops are complaining over a lack of stipends and food rations. In the last week, government troops vacated at least 3 army bases near Mogadishu. The soldiers say they haven't received their salaries, some for as much as 4 months. And the final European Union summit before the United Kingdom leaves the EU next week Friday is taking place, and tensions are at boiling point over there. The Prime Minister Theresa May has asked the EU's 27 members for a short extension on the original Brexit deadline to the 30th of June. But the EU on Wednesday raised the stakes in the UK's political crisis. Donald Tusk, the EU Council President, told the British MPs to either back withdrawal plans as negotiated by the Prime Minister or leave without a deal. That's a run through your headlines. Let's turn now to the Chinese President Xi Jinping's trip to Italy, Monaco and France. He's arrived in the last hour in Rome. China-European ties are in the spotlight as President Xi travels to Rome to start his first overseas trip of the year. During his time in Italy, he'll be meeting with the Italian President Sergio Mattarella, the Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte and other political leaders there. The two countries also set to sign a range of agreements designed to boost cultural and trade ties too. Discussions are now to generate tangible benefits for both citizens, or citizens of both countries rather, within the Belt and Road framework will also be held. Now, that Belt and Road initiative has faced quite a bit of resistance in Europe, making Italy's support for it all the more interesting. China's President Xi Jinping is scheduled to pay state visits to 3 European countries, as I mentioned, Italy included. Here's CGTN's Michal Bar-David reporting from Florence.
Chinese President Xi Jinping's 2-day visit in Rome and Sicily may be a turning point not only for Italy, but for the region as a whole in the years to come, as Rome is set to sign a memorandum of understanding to endorse China's Belt and Road Initiative BRI. For China, a new gateway to European markets. For Italy, a multi-billion-dollar investment. But there are some critics. The Italian Democratic Opposition Party have voiced concern of potential future debts and repercussions. While Western allies are worried of the influence and power China might gain in the region. However, Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte stood firm and repeatedly stated that the agreements would be beneficial for Italy.
Obviously, the Chinese economy is a huge economy with huge potential, even for Italian companies, and as a government, we believe that joining the BRI is important, also because, as a geographical location, Italy is the natural terminal of the BRI.
Chinese President Xi shared the sentiment. Prior to his arrival, an article signed by Xi was published in the Italian daily newspaper Corriere della Sera. Xi stressed the visit would mark the beginning of a new era for Chinese-Italian ties, with a strengthened comprehensive strategic partnership.
Leaders of both countries have emphasized that increasing cooperation between China and Italy would create win-win opportunities for businesses of both sides. And there are many industries that are open for collaboration, such as logistics, telecommunications, infrastructure, energy, and medicine.
Some analysts point out that the two countries also share many common values.
We share a strong commitment to environment. And you know, green economy is developing a lot in Italy, and it's an important industry, it's becoming a very important industry, and we know that China is becoming more and more concerned to the environmental development and to find ways to develop the economy, to increase also in sustainable ways.
Potential Chinese investments in Italian ports have also created a stir in Italy, with the Chinese president set to visit Sicily on Saturday, signaling an agreement regarding ports may be on the table. Michal Bar-David, CGTN, Rome.
Let's turn to the United States now. The Federal Reserve decided to leave interest rates unchanged at its 2-day meeting that ended on Wednesday, but the Fed Chair Jerome Powell said that the decision doesn't necessarily reflect concern about a potential recession.
After a 2-day meeting in Washington, the Fed says it's leaving rates at their current range of 2.25 to 2.5%. Last December, the Federal Reserve estimated that it would raise rates twice in 2019. Now they don't see any more this year. But the Fed chairman says he doesn't see any early signs of a looming financial crisis.
I would say overall, we don't see financial stability vulnerabilities as high. There are some aspects of the financial markets that we're carefully monitoring, and those are in the nature of things that might be amplifiers to a downturn as opposed to a financial stability concern, which might lead to a financial crisis and that kind of thing, which we don't see.
Early trading on Wall Street was flat ahead of the Fed's announcement. But US President Donald Trump's comments about US tariffs on Chinese imports could have been weighing on markets as much as speculation about interest rates.
No, we're not talking about removing them. We're talking about leaving them, and for a substantial period of time, because we have to make sure that if we do the deal with China, that China lives by the deal.
With the US-China trade war on pause as negotiations continue next week, the Fed also says it's less optimistic than it was about growth in the US economy. Just 3 months ago, the Fed predicted that the US economy would grow by 2.3%. Now, after a two-day meeting here in Washington, the US central bank has cut that estimate down to 2.1%, adding to the gloom of disappointing jobs figures at the start of the month. Giles Gibson, CGTN, Washington.
Let's turn to the media sector. Disney's $71 billion acquisition of 21st Century Fox is done and dusted. This enormous deal comes as Disney is set to launch its own direct-to-consumer site, and it's looking to take on tech giants in a battle to dominate the market for streaming content. Here's CGTN Karina Hugh with more from New York.
They sent us a message that they can take whatever they want.
Grossing $2.8 billion worldwide, Avatar, released in 2009, is the Fox Studios' biggest box office success. Now, it belongs to Disney. But Disney's $71 billion acquisition of Fox isn't about the box office. It's about winning the online streaming wars.
It's the end of the studio system in Hollywood, which is 100 years old this year. And, it's a new age. It's all gone digital, and it's all about content.
The acquisition of Fox gives Disney a whole treasure trove of films and TV shows, as well as a majority stake in streaming site Hulu. The merger comes as Disney is set to launch its own direct-to-consumer site Disney+, which will feature many of its family-friendly films. With the help of Fox's content, Disney hopes to go head-to-head with Amazon and Netflix.
Netflix has seen the handwriting on the wall for quite some time. They've ratcheted up their spending in original content to get ready for this shift. And I believe they will be well served by all of the moves that they've made, working more with Hollywood talent and kind of diversifying into various genres to cater to as wide an audience as possible. So we expect that they will do just fine.
The Disney-Fox merger comes less than a year after AT&T's $85 billion acquisition of Time Warner. Bibb says competition is leading to attractive subscription plans for consumers, but he says that could change.
Once the dust settles and it's clear who's going to run the game, whether it's Disney, Netflix, Amazon, or whomever, then the prices are going to start to go up.
Experts say Disney's acquisition of 21st Century Fox will likely lead to even more consolidation in the industry. Apple is set to announce its streaming video plans next week, but it doesn't have much content, so many are speculating that it too will be in the market to buy. Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
The South Korean carmaker Hyundai is facing falling sales and quite a few shareholder concerns too. Labor issues and struggles in its biggest market, China, are some of the reasons weighing down the firm. Management announced to turn things around with a redesign of its flagship car. Here's CGTN's Shane Ham with the details.
Hyundai Motors unveiling the latest new design of its flagship sedan, the Sonata, at this product launch just west of the South Korean capital of Seoul. The all-new Sonata is based on a brand new third-generation platform, which the company says will give engineers and designers more flexibility to develop future models and improve safety, fuel efficiency, and performance. You can see the sleek new design has a sportier look and has enhanced smart connectivity features for drivers, but a lot is riding, so to speak, on this new vehicle because it comes at a critical time for the company, both home and abroad. Reports suggest the company may be shutting down one of its plants in China, its biggest overseas market, because of falling demand and overcapacity. Meanwhile, one of its minority shareholders, U.S. hedge fund Elliott Management, is calling on the company to pay more than $6 billion in dividends this year and has called for more transparent corporate governance. The company is reportedly rejecting that proposal, as well as claims that it favors restructuring based on family owners in the conglomerate rather than minority shareholders. But a meeting is scheduled for this Friday for investors to vote on these and other proposals. Shane Hom, CGTN, Goyan, South Korea.
We're still in South Korea. The country has a world's highest smartphone penetration rate. Sometimes pedestrians in the country are so glued to their phones they really don't notice any traffic hazards around them, or anyone else for that matter. But those absent-minded walkers may soon be getting a bit of a break thanks to a new light system designed to prevent road accidents.
There are growing concerns that pedestrians glued to their phones will drive up what is already one of the highest road fatality and injury rates in the world's developed countries. South Korea's state-run Institute of Civil Engineering and Building Technology is looking to counter that. It has designed a system that uses flickering lights and laser beams at road crossings to warn smartphone zombies to look up and drivers to slow down in the hope of preventing traffic deaths.
I usually concentrate on my mobile phone when I'm walking on the street, and it may cause me bump into other people or have an accident. So I think this is helpful.
In addition to red, yellow and blue LED lights on the pavement, so-called zombies will also be warned by laser beams projected from nearby power poles and an alert sent to the phones by an app. The multi-dimensional warning system is operated by radar sensors and thermal cameras and comes with a price tag of 15 million won per crossing.
After
a radar sensor and a thermal imaging camera detect a vehicle and a pedestrian, the flashing lights on the road start flickering and the smartphone application sends a warning message to prevent small B accidents.
South Korea's traffic accident analysis system says that more than 1,600 pedestrians were killed in auto-related accidents in 2017. That's about 40% of the country's total traffic fatalities. The institute said the Zombie warning system is only installed at one road crossing in a populous suburb near Seoul, but is expected to eventually go nationwide. Daniel Allen-Bay, CGTN.
Right, and a quick run through commodity prices here for you. So cocoa futures are not particularly having an interesting month of March. They're down by almost 4 percentage points, almost down 4% rather, so far in the month. Let's focus on Cameroon for a moment. Fitch is basically pointing out that the forecast for processing the government has put out about 80,000 tons in this particular season, 2018-2019. Yeah, it's pretty optimistic in their view. They're expecting total output of about 245,000 tons from that particular country. And it's going to take a bit of time for the processing side of things to actually catch up and deliver a lot more produce into the market. Here's what's coming up next. Airbus is funding African startups on a pitching mission in Germany. We'll travel along with them when we come back. Welcome back. 10 startups from across Africa are in Germany to pitch their ideas and connect with new business partners and funding sources. The program they're part of is sponsored by Airbus and Germany's Federal Development Agency. It comes amid a push in Germany for much stronger ties between businesses on the continent and those in Germany. Here's Iris Spitzer with more from Berlin.
10 startups from 7 African nations, each with plans to use unmanned aerial technology to reshape the continent.
Ground sensors, drones, and satellite imagery.
They've come to Berlin to share their ideas, such as building drone systems to deliver medical supplies to remote parts of Ethiopia.
We hire young, energetic, and smart people from Ethiopia to work on these drones from design point of view to the manufacturing, and we hope to be the suppliers, not only for Ethiopia, but for our region as well.
The companies are part of a 6-month business accelerator program run primarily by Germany's GIZ Federal Development Agency and the European aerospace firm Airbus. For the startups, it means access to resources and technology to help them grow. For Airbus, the potential to connect with African innovators.
Maybe the startups are actually venturing into a new market with new technologies and new customers that are also new for us, so we could join forces and build a collaboration project together.
The startups have developed concepts such as using remote sensors to transmit environmental data to farmers and monitoring water supplies in Mali. Germany is looking to increase its involvement in Africa. Its G20 Compact with Africa initiative, launched 2 years ago, is designed to boost private investment on the continent, especially in countries which Berlin sees as committed to economic reforms. Last year, Germany created a $1 billion fund for private African investment as part of the compact. While the accelerator program isn't directly tied to that initiative, German financing and partnerships are certainly something that could emerge from this trip.
Finance partners, implementation partners, collaboration partners, research partners, various areas that we really see the European ecosystem bringing to what we do and helping us to optimize, improve, scale up.
Depending on how those connections pan out, some of these startups could find themselves back in Berlin soon enough. Ira Spitzer, CGTN, Berlin.
Cape Town is a dream destination for anyone who loves art. Collectors from around the world are increasingly interested in the city's booming art market. With a flourishing gallery scene, the cultural hub is often described as one of Africa's art powerhouses. Here's CGTN's Noel Makugu taking up the story.
From expensive oil paintings to assembled sculptures, Cape Town is a dream destination for any art enthusiast. Collectors from across the globe scour this creative capital in search for a deal. It's no surprise then that this city boasts an incredible wealth of galleries with multitudes of different genres from artists across the African continent.
Cape Town is the ideal city in that it is, like you said, a gateway. It allows for people who are accessing the continent to sort of arrive here, and it becomes this port, if you will, to sort of experience the rest of the continent, an entryway, and also subscribes itself to art as well. But it also works twofold in that it's a chance for art to then leave the continent through people sharing what they've seen and sort of opening up these experiences into an international market.
Dozens of venues such as the Association of Visual Arts Gallery and the coveted Grain Silos of Zaid's Museum for Contemporary Art are catering for art aficionados.
14.5 million.
At this packed live auction, collectors are phoned in from as far as Chile and Canada, hoping to get hold of one of the bidding masterpieces. Approximately $7.3 million worth of art has been sold at this event alone, making it the first ever local art auction to achieve this milestone in a single day.
We sold approximately 106 million rand worth of art, including commission tonight, which is a record for South Africa and for Africa as a continent. And I think it bodes extremely well for the future of African and South African art. So we are absolutely delighted.
South Africa's art market is currently valued at around $139 to $207 million a year. And through this visual nation, art continues to become the port experience at this African continent. Noel Makugu, CGTN.
Right, then a quick turn through the currencies as we wrap up the program. The Kenyan shilling hit an 8-week low yesterday, and it's pretty close to that at today's levels of about 100.79 over there. There was a rather disappointing auction yesterday as well for a 25-year bond. The government came to the market looking to raise about $500 or so million, but it only got bids of about $290 million, give or take. Considering how flush with cash banks are at the moment, this was a bit interesting, but probably that was more of a tenor mismatch than anything else, because the yield on that was actually not too bad, 12.66 Those are your currencies, and that's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. Several ways of getting your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.